So what are the worst cards in Marvel Snap? Also, how do you survive the early pull 3 hell? And most importantly, everything you could possibly want to know about counters is what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the Snapchat. I am joined by Alex. Yet again, it is episode 3. What's up, bud? How's the week? How you doing?
Oh, I've been having an absolute blast. I mean, it's a great week. It's a great time. Marvel Snap's still fresh. We got new cards, new season. How can you not be excited?
Officially 1 month into launch as of this last Tuesday, bud. It was an interesting week. We had Warrior Falls. That was quite the location.
Yeah, no kidding.
And guys, I am going off 0 sleep with a newborn. Legit stayed up all night, so it's going to be a special episode today. But we've got some great subjects. Again, guys, if you're new to this podcast, we have 3 topics on my channel, 3 on Alex's. If you want to watch all of them, you're going to have to go to both channels. But we've got some awesome subjects on Alex's. I'm talking about snapping, the value of variants, and the snap draft that you guys all said you loved a ton. And then you guys see right down below what we're talking about on this channel. Now, Alex, let's get to the first subject. And we have some fun ones today. Alex, let's talk about the worst cards in Marvel Snap. Now, we always talk about the best, right? Like every YouTube thumbnail, mine, yours, the best, the best, the best. But what about the worst? And I wanted to start out, and I think I want to go ahead and start and say, I don't think there's a lot of bad cards in Marvel Snap, but there's certainly some ones that stand out. I want you to kick us off. Which card do you think is categorically top 5 worst card in Marvel Snap?
I mean, how can we not go with the one that you have imaged directly underneath you, Quicksilver? I mean, it's so easy to start with Quicksilver being literally the worst card in Marvel Snap. I know that like on our tier list, we all gave it F. And then, people had some spicy comments about it. Like people had some opinions about Quicksilver, and like, I like that, right? It's like, but for me, I cannot imagine putting Quicksilver in a modern pull 3 deck. Like I just don't see it. I don't see the synergy. Like I just don't see how he could ever work in a pull 3 deck. But maybe that changes in the future. I don't know. Like, what do you think, Cozy?
I knew you were going to bring up Quicksilver. Here's the thing about the misconception, right? Card games, a lot of people come from Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra. I never played that one, but I know of it. And the thing is, curve is so important in those games. Because this is such a quick game, curve is just less important. Having that guaranteed 1-drop is just not as important as, let's say, something like American Chavez that can push down your other cards. Quicksilver, in my opinion, dude, has one use. It has one use, and it's for Agatha decks. And even then, you could find other replacements. I wouldn't argue much, man. I wouldn't argue. Have you put him in a deck outside of Agatha?
I mean, there was people that would suggest that he could work in something like a Jubilee deck, right? But for me, I would rather just not have a 1-drop than have Quicksilver and then Jubilee played on 4, right? Like I would rather just skip the 1-drop and have another big card that Jubilee can pull or Lockjaw can pull. I mean, the crazy thing about it is, yeah, you mentioned Agatha, but we're always like one expansion or like one new card away from like cards seeing like a resurgence, right? Like for instance, Warrior Falls. I would say, talk about another card that's terrible, Quake is one of the worst cards in the game too. But with Warrior Falls, suddenly Quake becomes a very interesting card because an opponent might have multiple cards in a lane, like 3 cards, and then you Quake the locations, they flip, and suddenly they're just beating each other up in Warrior Falls. So maybe Quicksilver is going to have this resurgence in a later date. Like there's no way of us knowing, but
That's true.
I thought, like, for instance, Quake, which is also terrible right now, is like finding this new spot in the meta. So who knows what happens?
Yeah, it's funny you say Quake. I actually was looking before we started filming. I'm like, which ones do I hate? Which one do I think are the worst? And I looked at Quake, and I'm like, at least you can counter some things going on, like on reveal, Kamar Taj, you can switch it out and try to like throw your enemy off or whatever. But yes, I think Quicksilver is quite an obvious one that's just terrible. The next one that I want to talk about, I have 2. And not only do I think she's a terrible card, the value is really not there. But I also have, I was forced on one of my streams to buy this variant. I said I would win like 3 games, and I didn't. I happened to lose the games, and I had to buy, no joke, probably the most scary variant ever. Alex, can you take a guess who I'm going to bring up? Who I think is probably the worst card in Snap at this moment.
Oh, man. The worst card in Snap at the moment? I mean, could it be Crystal?
How'd you know? I mean, dude,
That's actually
That's
Okay,
great.
people are gonna think we actually figured that out in advance. Legitimately, I had no idea you were gonna show Crystal.
Well, I mean, you have a brain, and that's all it takes to know that Crystal's just not a great card at the moment. The value's just not there, and I don't know. I want to talk about how you make some of these cards better. She is a puzzle, man, and if you think this is terrifying, look at this variant. I want you to feast your eyes. I want you to feast your eyes on that. That's something, huh? Look into those eyes and tell me what you see.
That is something. Those eyes, they peer through your soul.
It's the eyes, and I think it's Dan Hipp who does these. I actually really love all of his other versions. This one's just terrifying. But anyway, Crystal is a 4/4, guys, that if you put her in the middle location, so you have to play her in a certain location, she shuffles your hand into your deck to draw 3 cards. Very niche. Very niche of the niche of the niche, right? It's like a YouTuber focusing on like hamster Olympics. Like there's just not a lot of use to this card. So Crystal would be one of the top. How would you fix this, man? How would you fix Crystal?
You know what's interesting about this is that I look at Crystal, and you mentioned that the middle location, playing it there is kind of a limitation, but I actually think it's a benefit because there might be situations where you just need the 4/4, but you don't want to shuffle your deck. So I mean, I actually think that playing it just mid gives you the option of being able to play left, right, and actually conserve your hand. Right now, there's no real deck. Like, could you argue that a discard deck might utilize her well? Like, you blow through your cards, but I mean, then you just run the risk of discarding her anyway. So I don't know.
The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Mr. Negative. Like maybe you do Mr. Negative, it activates all the cards in your deck, and then you have a better chance to pull some of them out, right? But there's already better options. And she's a 4/4, so when do you play her? It's just, if maybe even a 3/3 would do at least play her a little early. I don't know. She's a tough cookie, man. A tough cookie.
Negative was a good call. I never thought of that. You're kind of right. It would be interesting in a negative deck, but as 4, like that means you'd have to Psylocke Negative to play him on 3 and then play Crystal. So now like you're really fixating on getting these specific cards at specific times, or else you're just screwed. So yeah, I don't know. Crystal just might be terrible. But then, like, it also feels like the kind of card that if you buff too much, like if it's like a 4/5, is it just then broken? Like, I don't know.
Right. That's the thing, right? They want to be careful with the buffing, right? They can't make a card too good. So I have one more card that I want to talk about that it's kind of deceiving. When you get to pull 3, there's just so many options, right? There's so many options, and you just don't know. Like, hey, is this good? I can't really tell. Right off the top of the head. And I've got to say, what is your opinion? What is your opinion on Yellow Jacket? I think Yellow Jacket is just such an underwhelming card. It's Wasp with 2, so it's a free play of 2. But every other card in the locations get -1 power. So you're looking at technically a 0 -4 or -2, a 0 -2.
I mean, it's so hard to say. I think he sucks. Like, I think Yellow Jacket's terrible. I don't know. Even to play it first in the lane so it doesn't actually get the -1, like you've wasted a card slot on a 0/2. Like 0/2 would be beneficial in like a Lockjaw deck, so you can play it on 3, but that's exactly what Wasp does.
With no con, and that's what I was thinking. Lockjaw's the best thing you get out of Yellow Jacket, but then if he pulls him out, then like all of a sudden like you're just in deep crap. I don't know. He's up there with Crystal in my opinion. Just a card that, guys, if you pulled him, I'm sorry. I apologize because you got yourself.
This card's worse than Crystal, I think.
A pretty dumpster card. So those are probably the worst ones, I would say. Let's go into our next subject, and Alex, I want you to get ready for a conversation that I'm excited about, because right now I ran a poll where all of our viewers are collection level wise, and the majority of them are into pool 2 going into pool 3. The good chunk of the majority out of about 20,000 votes, which is awesome. Pool 3 is exciting. It brings both excitement and disappointment, right? Because of the randomness of card pulls and getting boosters and titles. But one thing I see time and time again is if you get bad card pulls, how do you survive the early clutches of pool 3 hell? And I want to talk about some tips and then some decks you like. Let's start out with some decks. If you look at pool 2, what are some decks that you think transition well into pool 3 at the beginning of your early stages going into pool 3?
I mean, that's such a hard question to answer, because like one of the things that makes these decks hard is that like when you're entering pool 3 for the first time, it's hard to like recognize specific patterns of play of pool 3 cards that you're gonna be facing, right? So the first thing I would say is play a deck you're familiar with, and play one that might have natural straightforward progression into pool 3. Like right off the top of my head, I think destroy decks might be like that. They're kind of really decent in pool 2, and they're only missing one or two pieces in pool 3, right? So like you don't have they seem kind of consistent, don't they? Like I don't know. I feel like destroy decks could be
I think Devil Dinosaur Destroy does well because you get a lot of power quickly. You could get the Bucky Carnage, and then you have Devil, and you can even clone him with Moon Girl, and that still competes with a lot of decks early on in Pool 3. I think Control does pretty well too because you're still getting the
yeah.
same thing done, right? You're shutting down a lane early, and even let's say they have every card in the game. If they play like some major, huge card outside of like Doctor Doom, if they play like a Death, you can Shang-Chi the Death, and you're still controlling the board. So I think it might be Control, in my opinion. It is tough. Is there any other decks you like? I have one more that I think does pretty consistent.
I mean, I like the Sunspot Infinite, but I think that gets a little long in the tooth. Like if you're playing that consistently through pool 2, once you get to pool 3, I think that the players in pool 3 are going to be very, very aware of that pattern of play, and I think that deck generally loses effectiveness. But I'm thinking about like the Sandman style ongoing control lists.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have so many decks now when you get into pool 3 are so combo centric. You even have decks that go Patriot Mystique on turn 6. You have negative decks. You have magic decks going into the turn 6, 7, all about trying to extend the game and pump cards out with Sarah, who I mean is universally loved. Sandman just shuts all those down, right? So if you can have a Sandman style control ongoing list, you drop Sandman, play some good cards on 5, even whether it be Claw or something like that, then you drop a Spectrum on 6 and pump the board. Like, I don't know, that could work as well.
Yeah, so I would think Control altogether, guys, is going to be the deck that you want to probably go into. Some type of a Control deck to get used to. Destroy and Devil Dinosaur can also work. And then, like, if you run those decks, then feel free to run the Infinite Sunspot combo and run Armor in there, which we'll talk about when we get to the counter cards. But as for some tips, Alex, that I want to address that I think help, and lastly for decks, guys, ongoing decks with Spectrum continue to surprise people. Like they just, again, whatever people, they just, especially when you get to pool 3, like Claw, nobody expects Claw in pool 3, I tell you.
Nobody does, yeah.
Lastly for decks, but as far as tips go, I've got 2 tips that I would definitely, I was going to make a video about this, but I think this is the perfect time to talk about it, Alex. The 2 biggest tips I have for you guys when you go into pool 3, and the first one's obvious, we're going to talk about it on Alex's channel a bit more, is snapping. Guys, when you enter pool 3, there's going to be so many things that you're not used to seeing, and this is my biggest tip. Don't snap a ton for the first while into pool 3. You're going to see a lot of combos that you've never seen before. You're going to have confidence. You're going to shut down a lane with Storm, and then Doctor Doom comes out of nowhere, and you're like, I didn't even process that could happen. And so, not saying you should never snap, but that's going to make it feel a lot less punishing. Yes, you're not going to win as many cubes, but you got to learn the decks you're going up against. Opposed to pool 1 and 2, there's just so much more. Alex, would you say that's a tip you like, and what's one that you would want to kind of add to that?
I mean, that's an amazing tip, because if you're snapping in early pool 3 and you really have not built that experience of knowing, what that combo that they're playing might look like, then you might find yourself often surprised, thinking that you might be overconfident in your board, not expecting a huge combo play that's available in pool 3 for cards you don't even have yet, right? There's a chance you get hit with cards and like the never seen before screens popping up while you're getting destroyed with 8 cubes. Like, so yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, kind of build that experience profile first before you really start going ham on that snap button.
Yeah, for sure. That's the first tip I have. And the second tip I have for you guys in early pool 3, outside of the decks that I would play, is learning counters. Guys, learning counters and learning when to use tech cards. Now, we're going to get to that subject in just a heartbeat, but if you can learn how to counter what you're going up against, or learn kind of how to play the opposite locations, that's going to be huge, because you can kind of shut down and know what they're doing early, and that just takes time. It takes practice. But the other tip is learning the tech cards, when to use them, who to use, and I want to go into a subject that I think is pretty exciting. Alex, let's talk about the counter cards in the game, the tech cards in the game. I'm going to set you up first. What is your favorite counter card in Marvel Snap?
It has to be Shang-Chi. Like, when you Shang-Chi something and it just gets knocked out completely, there's very few feelings that are as good as that. Like, dropping Shang-Chi has got to be one of the greatest feelings of Marvel Snap, and watching the opponent just have their board explode with cards that they really thought like, oh, there's no way he's gonna beat a 64 power Black Panther. What could he do with that? Oh, a 4-cost card that just punches it out completely, right? Like,
Yeah.
I love Shang-Chi. Like, I think the design is perfect because it's like one of those things where like, yes, you want to build power on the board, but also like if you build too much power, like there's this risk element of what Shang-Chi's capable of doing. I absolutely love it. I love it. It's such a good card.
Oh, yeah.
I'll always run Shang-Chi in my decks if I can.
Yeah, dude, it's funny you say that because Shang-Chi, like the only time Shang-Chi feels bad to pull is, you know, when you don't have any other options and you're like, oh, I'm not going to get any value out of this Shang-Chi. It's my only 4 cost. And that's the only time it feels bad. But the payoff, dude, I 100% agree. And one thing that I think needs to be talked about more, and we will kind of maybe in the future, maybe next episode, is initiative and just like how important it is to keep track of initiative. Because Shang-Chi going into Black Panther, like you just said, turn 5, right? Going into turn 6, Arnim Zola is coming out from your opponent. You know he's coming, and you have initiative. Well, done, right? But if you don't do it right, then he's going to go ahead and copy it, and then you effectively didn't do anything with your Shang-Chi. So yeah, dude, 100%. I think Shang-Chi is one of the more common counters. Enchantress, you guys used a lot in pool 1 and 2. That's because Ongoing has a much stronger presence. Not to say he doesn't have one in pool 3. But Enchantress, I do throw in a lot of my decks. I kind of always find value out of that. And Rogue will be another option you can use. But, you know, Alex, I want to know your opinion, and we talked about it briefly, I think, on the last Snapchat, is Armor. Now, Armor is being ran a lot more these days. And the main reason why is because, dude, but Pool 2, Pool 3, the top of them, the meta right now is Destroy. I mean, there's just so much Destroy decks, so many combinations. And Armor just like, man, there's not a faster retreat in all the land than when you throw this out before they can destroy their combo they're looking for. So Armor's one that I would say is probably my most used, second to Shang-Chi.
Yeah, this card's unbelievable. It is so good. You get it in pool 1. When you bring it out in pool 2, it protects your Sunspot. It blows up Destroy decks. Like, Destroy decks absolutely hate it. I'm actually kind of sad you took it down because that variant was so beautiful. I absolutely love it. You always have the best variants. But honestly, Armor is ridiculous. It only becomes an issue, I guess, when you're playing against Destroyer decks later on, because then if you set up multiple lanes with Armor by accident, because they have their own armor, it just basically becomes an invincibility shield for a free Destroyer. That's kind of a bit of a problem.
Right.
But one thing I will go back to before we talk about everyone's favorite puppy dog on the screen there is you brought up 2 really interesting cards that I really want your opinion on.
Okay.
You brought up just a few minutes ago Enchantress and Rogue. And in pool 3, I often find myself debating between the two as to which one I want to include in my decks. So I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts between Enchantress and Rogue as a general tech card and counter in a deck.
So Rogue, I think, is viewed in a lot of different ways from the community. Pretty split card, and I'm glad you brought this up. Good question. It really depends, right? I'm more favored towards on reveal or no specific type decks, and so Enchantress sneaks into a lot because I don't really have any, or I don't suffer, right? If I'm playing an ongoing deck, I don't love to run her because sometimes it just jacks you up, right? Like, locations can mess you up, it can pull her in. You just don't want to mess up your own ongoing effects. I run Rogue a ton, dude, because mainly from that tech, that counter that I'm trying to do. Let's say I'm trying to shut down Devil Dinosaur, man. What's better, shutting down Devil Dinosaur or just completely obsoleting their play that they just made? And if you don't know what Rogue does, guys, I can bring it up here on the screen. She takes the ongoing effect from the card, one card on the other side. Now, this can be a little bit of a gamble if there's an armor and a Devil Dinosaur, let's say.
I mean, I love Rogue. I think that it is like so much more punishing than the Enchantress because like when you steal Iron Man, that is like the best. Yep. You hit Iron Man with Rogue and it's just like retreat immediately. You snap, you throw down Rogue, you steal Iron Man, and it's like, wow, I just spent 5 energy on this 0/0. 5/0, sorry. This is nasty. And like Rogue has those like immensely insane play potential, but I feel like in a general sense, I feel like Enchantress is so much safer. Better tempo as a 4/4. You can just throw it in a lane if you have no other play. And against ongoing lists, like she just deletes the entire thing. Like when you see Patriot, Mystique, I mean, they're both so good. I guess we were talking about it before. like even with the bad cards, like you find niche uses and niche cases where some of these cards could be absolutely wild. And it's the same thing with Enchantress and Rogue.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll give the benefit to Enchantress is, and this is the only time Rogue feels bad. Like, I'll take her out of my deck when this happens every now and then, and I'm like, no, idiot. It was like 1 game, 2 games. When it's turn 3, and you have like, couple 5, couple 6 costs, and you have Rogue, and you're like, there's no ongoing. I can't get a 1 power drop. That's not going to do anything. So you just have to skip your turn. That's the only time. Because Enchantress, you get a 4/4. I still play her, even if she doesn't get the effect, right? You get that value. But it's a fun argument to look at between the two. I think we didn't talk about them, and we'll close with this. The one I run the least, and honestly, it's because of how much I love On Reveal, is the Puppy Dog. He's not my favorite Puppy Dog. That's Lockjaw. But Cosmo, guys, comment down below. Have you played a Hobgoblin? Are you a victim of playing into your own Cosmo? It's okay. It's a safe space.
I've done it.
I mean, we've all done it, right? But he is a huge counter to huge cards, Alex. Cards like Killmonger. You can shut him down, and you can put armor in another lane and really protect your 1 cost. Enchantress. You can protect your ongoing cards with him. You can power up Destroyer. Alex, what do you think of Cosmo?
I mean, Cosmo also can be, you're talking about Destroyer. It destroys destroyed decks, right? You drop Cosmo on the Nova Bucky Barnes, and the guy just feels terrible. But also, like, it can be used against you in some ways too. Like, if a guy is playing a Destroyer deck and you play your own Cosmo, now he has a free location that he has optionality of not blowing up his board. Also, we've all been there when we have played cards, we forget Cosmo's there, and he even makes like a beeping sound, right? They added that. I'm pretty sure he makes a beeping sound because like someone on the dev team obviously lost cubes throwing their who would be their Azola into a Cosmo lane and then finding out hard way. And not that you'd ever do that anyway, because you just replicate Cosmo probably based on how RNG works, but yeah, everyone's been in that situation where you completely troll yourself with Cosmo. There's a few cards like that completely could be soul shattering when you troll yourself. But Cosmo's got to be the number 1 where everyone, especially when you first get him and you're just trying them, you're like, wow, I just ruined my own game.
Right, and you're like, I'm never doing that again, and then it happens like 5 games later.
You do it again, yeah.
But yeah, so those are the tech cards, guys, and so what I guess the final statement to end with, right? Because we just broke down when they're useful, who we like. How many do you put in your deck? That I want to know how many specifically. Do you run 2? Do you like to run 3, 1, none? What? I know it's specific, but Alex, what do you think?
It's hard to say. Like, I mean, most decks, I like having 1 tech card. I will tell you this from a deck building perspective. I always feel nervous when I don't have a tech card. Like, there's some lists that, like, for instance, like Zoo lists often don't run Shang-Chi and they don't run Enchantress. And so you're in the situation where like, well, I'm just susceptible to every tech card and I don't have many counters. Maybe only armor is your primary counter to protect your Ant-Man or something like that. I personally find myself very uncomfortable not running tech cards. In fact, even in all my beginner lists I can't even remember how many videos I've made for beginner lists. I almost always include another tech card we didn't talk about yet, but was Scarlet Witch, because like, you need that location control. They're so important. Like, I don't know. I can't build a deck without one. I feel like I need at least 1 reliable control and tech card. And I feel like I often lean on Enchantress, especially in Pool 2. I know a lot of players are still in Pool 2, because Enchantress, you're going to see a lot of Devil Dinosaur. Yes, Shang-Chi can punch out Devil Dinosaur, but also Enchantress deals with it too. And Enchantress also deals with Khazar, also deals with Blue Marvel. And so I don't know. I find myself often leaning on Enchantress more often than not. Yep. But I mean, every deck I made, I'm really considering tech. I'm sure you're the same. Yeah. So I think the biggest common issue I see in deck building is that you've got, let's say it's 6 p.m. You got your feet up on the couch, movie's on. You're like, I'm gonna build some new decks, and you're like, I'm gonna build an Odin on reveal deck. I feel great about that. And then what do you sort by on reveal, and you just like boom, boom. Add, and you have a full deck, and you kind of all commit. It's the same issue as all committing on like a featured hot location. You don't need to go all in, right, on one specific thing. So throwing in at least 1 is, for the most part, very advantageous. Every now and then I'll throw in 2, and that's a Shang-Chi, Enchantress, usually a Rogue.
combo there. But yeah, so that is going to be it for my half of the episode. Again, you'll be seeing the other half on Alex's. And guys, we have seen the comments. We are working on making this in podcast format. So that you guys that listen to audio can also listen to this wherever you might be. I don't know why you'd want to listen to us random jamokes, but here we are. Alex, thank you so much for coming, man. Any last closing notes?
No, thank you for having me, and guys, thank you so much for the support of the series. Continue to smash that like button, share it with your friends. For a podcast like this, word of mouth means so much to us. So continue to do your thing, share the content, and we appreciate your support.
Yes, guys, it's different than what's out there, but it's a lot of fun. All right, guys, we shall see you on the next one. Peace out.